What a man feels in the very moment he enters a woman is far more layered than most people ever dare to imagine. For years, we've been told that intimacy is nothing more than something physical, a short exchange of desire, passion, and release. But the truth is, inside that one instant, there exists an entire storm of emotions, thoughts, and feelings that most men will never admit. Not to their partners, not to their closest friends, and sometimes not even to themselves. Yet, if you as a woman could peek beneath the calm expression he wears, you might see something that could completely change the way you understand connection, trust, attraction, and even love itself. Think carefully about this. Why is it that some men who seem bold, composed, and strong in every other part of life suddenly appear hesitant, almost breakable, when they are finally with a woman? Why do men who swore they only wanted something casual, something without commitment, end up falling far deeper than they ever expected after sex? And why is it that for so many men, the bedroom becomes the single place where their pride, their masculinity, and their entire sense of worth feel as though they are being tested? I used to believe that intimacy was mainly about physical desire, the rush of hormones, the fire of skin against skin. But the more I observed, reflected, and truly listened, the more I realized that for men, something deeper is happening, something raw, something hidden yet far more powerful. It's not just lust, not just instinct, not just pleasure, it's about identity, and that understanding changes everything. I don't want to reveal everything at once because what a man experiences in those moments can't be wrapped up neatly in one phrase. But here is what I can tell you. In that exact second when he enters a woman, he feels a paradox that almost defines his existence. On one side comes a rush of strength, confidence, and affirmation. On the other comes a wave of fragility, nervousness, and uncertainty. It's a tension he rarely admits, but it shapes how he bonds, how he commits, how he trusts, and how he remembers. Sometimes I wonder if women truly knew the full weight of what men carry in that split second. Would relationships look different? Would trust grow stronger? Would heartbreak be less common? Or would it all grow even more dangerous? Because knowing how much power you hold in that moment could tempt you to use it carelessly. And that question has no easy answer. But what is certain is this: every man, whether he admits it or not, feels tested in intimacy, not by numbers, not by time, but by the subtle, almost invisible responses of his partner, the way she sighs, the softness in her eyes, or the stiffness in her body. The silent language becomes louder than any praise he's ever received, heavier than any trophy or achievement he's ever earned. And yet most women don't realize how much their quiet signals in those moments shape the way a man sees himself. So let me ask you directly, have you ever looked into a man's eyes during intimacy and seen a flicker of something that felt slightly out of place? A flash of doubt, a sudden seriousness, a silent glance that almost begged you for reassurance? That wasn't random. That was the truth escaping through his mask. The pressure he hides in the outside world leaks out here because he can no longer control it. And this is why intimacy is never only about pleasure, it is also about exposure, his exposure. For many men, that kind of exposure feels terrifying, so they cover it up with bravado, with dominance, even arrogance. For others, however, it feels liberating, a rare chance to finally be seen completely without walls, without shields, without armor. The difference between those two kinds of men and the way women respond to each creates effects that echo far beyond the bedroom. Here is the part that I can never shake. When a man feels both powerful and fragile in the very same heartbeat, he is at his most human. It's the one space where his walls crumble, where his pride bends, and where his soul whispers truths he will never dare say aloud. What happens afterward depends entirely on how that moment is received. Will it grow into deeper connection, or will it fade into emptiness? That's where the story actually begins. Let's explore the first layer of this paradox. paradox, the sensation of strength and fragility colliding in the same breath. On the surface, it might sound impossible. How can a man feel both confident and uncertain at the same time? Yet, if you ask any man, though most will never admit it, you'll find that this contradiction is present in nearly every intimate encounter. When he enters you, there is an undeniable wave of pride. He feels chosen. He feels as though he has crossed a sacred threshold, a place not given to just anyone. In that instant, his masculinity feels recognized. It is almost as if the universe whispers, "Yes, you are enough to be trusted here." That sense of acceptance can be intoxicating. And yet, almost in the very same breath, vulnerability strikes, because in the exact moment he feels strongest, he also feels the most uncovered. He knows you can sense everything: his rhythm, his hesitation, his level of confidence. He realizes he has no mask, no shield, no role to hide behind. You feel the bare truth of him, and that nakedness terrifies him in ways he will rarely confess. For a long time, I thought men only feared rejection in dating, in careers, or in friendships. But I've come to see that their deepest fear often lives here, in the silent, breathless world of intimacy, where failure means not just losing approval, but losing significance. Have you ever noticed how some men rush through sex almost as though they are racing against their own vulnerability, hoping to finish before it is exposed? Or how others exaggerate their confidence, performing with loudness or domination, as if to bury the small voice inside whispering, "What if I'm not enough?" That is the paradox alive inside him. And I can't help but wonder, if more women could truly see both sides, the proud warrior and the uncertain boy, would judgment be replaced with compassion? Or would the responsibility of holding his ego make intimacy heavier than it should be? Here is what I believe. The men who lean into that fragility, the ones who take the risk of being seen without their armor, are the ones who become unforgettable lovers. Not because they are flawless, but because they are fully present. They are not performing to hide, they are connecting to be understood. And the women who respond with reassurance, who answer with their body, who meet him with softness rather than criticism, unlock in him a level of confidence no amount of external success could ever replace. This is the point where intimacy shifts from performance into true connection. And connection, once awakened, has the power to transform him in ways nothing else can. But there's something even deeper here that keeps drawing my attention. Why does this paradox hold such control over men? Why does the balance between being chosen and being fragile shape so much of their inner identity? I believe it's because intimacy is one of the very few places in life where a man cannot fake his worth. In his career, he can climb titles and collect accomplishments. In his friendships, he can hide behind jokes or distractions. In society, he can show off wealth, status, or charm. But in bed, stripped of all these masks, the truth comes forward instantly. And that truth is not something he decides, it's decided by you. That thought both terrifies him and grounds him. It ties his need for validation to your responses. And here is the twist. That response does not need to be grand or theatrical. Sometimes it's the smallest signals, your breath quickening, your body leaning closer, the way your eyes soften, that break down his fear and turn it into energy, strength, and devotion. Suddenly, the fragile boy disappears and the assured man takes his place. Not because he forced himself into that role, but because you gave him space to become it. That shift is what creates the kind of closeness that stays in memory long after two bodies separate. Yet not every man manages this contradiction with ease. Some retreat from closeness completely, fearing the exposure more than they desire the connection. Others move from woman to woman, chasing endless approval without ever facing the vulnerability beneath. And a few, maybe the rarest, allow themselves to be both tough and tender, both sure and uncertain, and in that balance, they create the kind of passion that leaves a lasting mark in the sweetest way. I have asked myself many times, is it really fair that women carry this much influence over how a man feels about himself in bed? Some would say yes, because men have held power in so many other parts of life. Others would say no, that intimacy should never be a test of worth. I do not claim to know the final answer, but I do know this paradox exists and it changes everything. Because once a man feels both strong and vulnerable with you, the next truth begins to rise within him, and that truth is even harder for him to admit. If the first paradox of strength and softness reveals the cracks in his armor, then the second truth of closeness is the heavy weight of validation. For him, intimacy is not only about pleasure, it is proof that he is desired, proof that he was chosen, proof that in your eyes he is enough. This need goes much deeper than most women imagine because it connects back to a question men have carried since they were boys: am I worthy? I used to dismiss this thought, assuming that validation was shallow, something only insecure people needed. But the more I listened, observed, and reflected, the more I realized it exists in every man, even in those who appear the most confident. In fact, sometimes the louder the confidence, the greater the hidden need. Have you noticed how a man relaxes differently when you let out a sound of pleasure? How his body lights up when you reach for him without hesitation? That is validation showing its power. It is not about him conquering your body, but about his soul being recognized by you. And here lies a powerful irony. A man can thrive in his work, be admired by peers, even lead others with charisma. But if he does not feel chosen by the woman he desires, all of it feels empty. Isn't it astonishing that a whisper, a moan, or the simplest touch can outweigh years of achievements? Some people might say it shows men are fragile. Others might say it shows they are beautifully human. I lean toward the second because it is in that need for reassurance that men reveal their most honest selves. But there is a danger too. If he seeks closeness only to answer the question, am I enough? Then no amount of intimacy will ever satisfy him. He will go from one body to another, each moment lifting him briefly, only to drop him deeper into emptiness when it ends. That is why some men become hooked on novelty, confusing endless variety with true fulfillment. But when a man connects with a woman he deeply values, the validation changes. It no longer feels like a short-lived ego boost. It transforms into gratitude, respect, even devotion. That is when intimacy shifts from being proof to being presence. And when that happens, something more ancient awakens, a sense of connection that goes beyond words. This is the third truth. Sex, especially penetration, is the closest thing to dissolving the walls men are taught to live behind. In daily life, men are told to stand apart, to be in control, to never reveal weakness. But in intimacy, those rules fall apart. He is literally inside you, no longer separate, and that merging stirs something ancient in him. I often wonder if this is why some men seem bound to one woman, unable to let go, even when others are near. I believe it is, because it is not simply about her body, it is about how her body makes him feel at home within himself. When his heartbeat syncs with yours, when his breathing falls into your rhythm, he experiences a belonging the outside world never gives him. This is where biology and emotion intertwine. Oxytocin, dopamine, testosterone, all rushing through his system, are not just chemicals. They are invisible threads tying his sense of self to the moment. And what fascinates me most is that he often doesn't even realize it. He may tell himself it was casual, he may laugh it off as just sex, but his body gives him away. His nervous system remembers. His body craves not only release, but the unique way your presence eased his fear and magnified his pride. That is why some men return again and again to one woman even when logic tells them to move on, because their biology has already chosen for them. This makes me wonder if women truly see the immense power they hold in shaping a man's attachment. Do they realize that their reactions can make intimacy feel addictive, not in a shallow or compulsive way, but in a way that rewires his very sense of bonding? It is both beautiful and dangerous because with power comes responsibility. A woman can lift a man into his most present and connected self, or she can leave him emptier than he was before, and most men will never admit this aloud. They will cover it with jokes, confidence, or silence. But deep down, every man knows when a woman's body welcomed him as more than just flesh. He knows when the connection was real, and that knowledge becomes a memory that lingers, shaping his choices, his desires, even his love. This leads us to the next truths men struggle with in silence: the shadow of fear and the spark of love. Two forces that shape intimacy in ways most people never notice. If validation ties a man's worth to the way you respond, then fear is the shadow that walks close behind. Fear is always present in closeness, though most men will never admit it. It is not the kind of fear that freezes him, but the kind that humbles him. He quietly wonders, am I enough for her? Is she satisfied? Will she compare me to someone else? These thoughts echo in his mind even when his body looks confident. I used to assume men were carefree in intimacy, driven only by desire, but I now believe the truth is different. Many men carry an unspoken fear of being forgettable in bed, and when you think about it, isn't that fear completely human? Who doesn't want to be remembered, to leave a mark, to be desired again after the moment ends? Have you seen how much effort a man puts into lasting longer, into making you moan, into making sure you remember the way he touched you? That is fear turned into fuel. But without reassurance, that same fear can crush him. A single sign of disinterest, a quiet body, a cold expression, and his confidence shatters faster than he would ever admit. I often wonder, do women realize how much power lies in a single sound, a look, a whisper? The irony is that fear can be turned into fire if you give him approval. With your voice, your breath, your touch, you can unlock a side of him that feels limitless. In that moment, the nervous boy disappears, replaced by a man pouring himself into you with a passion that feels endless. This is the delicate dance of intimacy, fear on one side, comfort on the other, and the result depends on which one you allow to guide you. Yet deeper than fear rests the possibility of love. Not every man feels it in every meeting, but every time he joins with a woman, there is a chance for love to appear. Sometimes he starts with only desire, raw and unpolished, but once inside, something changes. The warmth, the nearness, the acceptance. It awakens emotions he never expected to feel. I've often asked myself, why do men who swore they only wanted something casual suddenly become attached after sex? Why do some who promised themselves to stay distant end up falling harder than they ever planned? I think it's because intimacy skips the logic of the mind. A man can insist it's only physical, but his body and heart tell a different story. The chemistry, the blending, the rhythm, it all creates feelings he cannot escape. And this is where love slips in, often softly, without asking permission. It may not be full devotion in the beginning, but it plants a seed. And if he already has care for you, that seed can grow into something precious, something that reshapes his path. Some may call it weakness, others may say it's simply biology. I see it as reality, because love, born in the fire of closeness, is one of the strongest forces that can bind two people. And here's what I find most striking. Men often develop feelings faster through physical intimacy than through endless conversations. They may never admit it out loud, but their bodies reveal it. A man who thought he had everything under control may wake up and realize that somewhere between the breathing, the touches, and the closeness, his heart has already surrendered. Isn't that something? That what he expected to be casual ends up being the very thing that undoes him. Yet love born in this way carries both beauty and danger. If cared for, it can turn passion into devotion. If left unchecked, it can leave him puzzled, unsettled, even hurt. And so in the same moment, men fight a silent battle between fear and love. Two forces pulling in different directions, yet both shaping who he becomes in your presence. Fear whispers, "Don't let her down." Love whispers, "Stay close to her." And in between those two voices, his identity is reshaped again and again. But the story doesn't finish there, because beyond fear, beyond love, lies the deeper truth of what intimacy really means to a man. And it's a truth most women don't see until much later. When you step back and see everything a man feels the moment he is with you, it becomes clear that intimacy is never just about the body. It is about identity, about doubt, about love, and about connection, all colliding in seconds that feel endless for him. That moment is both a test and a gift. A test because his worth feels exposed, his pride hangs in balance, his fears echo in the background. A gift because if you answer with openness, comfort, and presence, he receives a kind of confirmation that no achievement outside the bedroom could ever compare to. I sometimes wonder if more women knew the depth of this hidden struggle, would relationships last longer? Would betrayal become less common? Or would this knowledge tempt some to misuse that power? I don't pretend to have the perfect answer. But I know one thing, many men carry a secret emptiness that no amount of wealth, fame, or success can erase. It is only in intimacy, in being chosen, that they feel that emptiness ease. That is why a man who seems powerful in the world may feel fragile in your arms. And that fragility is not weakness, it is truth. Have you noticed how a man who appears untouchable in public can suddenly turn gentle, almost boy-like in private? That is not by chance. That is the real part of him surfacing, the part the world will never get to witness. And if you, as a woman, can look at that part without judgment, you build a bond that lasts far beyond desire. But tension rises again. Not every man seeks intimacy as a door to connection. Some only chase it for validation, leaving you emptier than before. How do you see the difference? For me, the answer is not in his promises, but in his presence. Does he stay close afterward? Does he hold you gently? Does he soften into gratitude instead of rushing to escape? These subtle actions reveal whether his need for validation grew into devotion or whether it disappeared the moment the act was over. And this, I believe, is why sex can either heal or deeply wound. It is never neutral. It changes how he sees himself and how he sees you. Which brings me to the final thought. When a man is inside you, you are not simply sharing your body. You are shaping his story of who he is. That responsibility is heavier than most people ever speak of. With a touch, with a sound, you can crown him a king. With distance, with silence, you can make him feel unseen. And that memory will stay in him long after the night is over. Isn't that amazing? And maybe a little frightening too. The truth is, intimacy carries more power than most are ready to accept. But power is not meant to be feared. It is meant to be respected. And if you respect it, you can build connections that last, that transform, that turn brief passion into unforgettable love. Now I want to ask you, what do you think? Have you ever seen this hidden side of a man? The fear behind the confidence, the love beneath the desire. Do you think intimacy uncovers the deepest truth of a person's soul, or is it just another act we learn to play? Share your thoughts, because I want to hear them, and if this gave you a new perspective, follow for more. Save this to come back later and share it with someone who needs to understand, because the more we speak honestly about intimacy, the more we learn to love without masks. But this conversation doesn't end here, because beyond fear, beyond validation, beyond love, there lies an even deeper truth about why men and women are drawn to one another at all. And that truth will change the way you see every touch, every kiss, every moment of closeness from this day on.